The stars glittered coldly against the void as Admiral Selena Kova stood at the viewport of Peacekeeper Station Aegis. Earth hung like a blue jewel in the distance, peaceful and serene. How fragile that peace truly was, she thought, watching as patrol vessels departed in perfect formation. Their gleaming hulls caught the distant sunlight before vanishing into the darkness of space, toward the furthest human colonies. The 25th century had brought humanity further than their ancestors could have dreamed. First contact 2 centuries ago had opened the stars to them, revealing dozens of species bound in complex webs of alliances, rivalries, and treaties. The Interstellar Council, housed in its impressive orbital yard that circled a neutral star, maintained a fragile galactic order through diplomacy and carefully balanced power. Humanity had risen steadily through these ranks, earning respect not through military might, but through consistent ethical leadership and unwavering commitment to peace. Treaties were sacred to humans, something Selene had always taken pride in. The peacekeepers she commanded weren't conquerors or warriors. They were guardians, the thin line ensuring human worlds remained safe while diplomacy did its work. "Admiral," a voice interrupted her thoughts. "The Typhon Patrol has just cleared the jump gate." Selene turned to face Captain Rian Voss, her second in command for the past 3 years. Rian was all sharp edges, from her precisely trimmed hair to her perpetually skeptical expression. Where Selene believed in systems and protocols, Rian trusted instincts and force projection. "Good," Selene nodded. "Schedule the next rotation for 36 hours. I want fresh crews and ships fully prepped." "Of course, Admiral." Rian hesitated, then added, "Permission to speak freely." Selene gestured for her to continue, though she suspected what was coming. "Our patrols along the Xenilian border are spread too thin. Intelligence reports increased activity in their military shipyards, and yet we maintain the same predictable patterns we've used for years." Rian stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The Xenilians don't respect treaties, Admiral. They respect strength." Selene had heard this argument before, had considered it many times herself during sleepless nights. But principles had to mean something. "We respect treaties, Captain," she replied firmly. "That's what separates us from opportunists like the Xenilians. We honor our agreements even when it would be convenient not to. That's why the Council trusts us." "And if the Council's trust doesn't protect our colonies?" Rian countered. Before Selene could respond, her comm panel chimed with an urgent alert. The face of Ambassador Marin Vale appeared, lined with uncharacteristic tension. "Admiral Kova." Marin's voice was tight, controlled. "We have a situation on Typhon 4. You need to see this immediately." The communication center of Aegis fell silent as the footage played across the main screen. Grainy surveillance feeds showed Xenilian warships emerging from faster-than-light travel near Typhon 4, a rugged mining colony housing over 20,000 human settlers. The vessel's silhouettes were unmistakable, assault carriers designed for ground invasions, not the patrol craft permitted in that sector under existing treaties. Selene watched in growing horror as the ships deployed ground forces with methodical precision. This wasn't a border skirmish or a misunderstanding. The attack patterns targeted residential districts first, followed by infrastructure hubs and emergency response centers. The Xenilians were executing a textbook subjugation strategy. "This footage is 6 hours old," Ambassador Vale explained, her voice breaking slightly. "By the time our patrol ships received the distress call and arrived, the Xenilian forces had already departed. They left behind," she paused, visibly composing herself, "thousands dead, primarily civilians. Children's dormitories were specifically targeted. The survivors report mass abductions, presumably for labor camps in the Xenilian outer systems." A cold stillness settled over Selene as the implications became clear. The non-aggression pact with the Xenilian hegemony was renewed just last year. This is a deliberate violation. Worse, Marin continued. Our intelligence indicates this attack was sanctioned at the highest levels of their government. It wasn't a rogue commander or a miscalculation. It was policy. What's the Council's response? Celine asked, already suspecting the answer. Marin's expression hardened. I've called an emergency session, but several key member species are already signaling reluctance to intervene. The Zexians, in particular, are blocking procedural motions that would allow sanctions against the Xenelians. Of course they would, Celine thought bitterly. The Zexian Imperium had lucrative mining contracts with the Xenelians that would be jeopardized by council action. Politics as usual. While human bodies grew cold on distant Typhon 4. I'll prepare a full security assessment, Celine said, and I want to address the council personally. After Marin's image faded, Celine turned to find Rian watching her. Eyes glinting with vindication, she was too professional to voice aloud. Prepare a comprehensive defensive strategy for all border colonies, Celine ordered. And have our intelligence division compile everything we have on Xenelian military capabilities. As her staff hurried to comply, Celine allowed herself one private moment of doubt. Had humanity's faith in treaties been naive all along? The faces of Typhon's dead children seemed to answer with silent accusation. The Interstellar Council chamber was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a vast rotunda with delegates from 26 species arranged in concentric rings. The architecture was deliberately imposing, with soaring pillars of crystalline material that captured and refracted light from the nearby star. It was designed to remind everyone present of what cooperation could achieve. Today. That symbolism felt hollow to Celine as she stood beside Ambassador Vale at the human delegation's podium. The chamber hummed with whispered conversations in dozens of languages, translation devices struggling to keep pace with the complex diplomatic jargon. Lord Silas of the Zexian Imperium dominated the inner circle, a tall, slender being with iridescent scales that rippled with subtle colors as he moved. The Zexians were among the oldest council members, their civilization spanning thousands of years. That ancient perspective often translated to a cold pragmatism that Celine found difficult to stomach. The council recognizes Ambassador Marin Vale of Earth, announced the chair being, a bioluminescent Cularian whose light patterns indicated formal neutrality. Marin stepped forward, her dark skin contrasting with the white diplomatic uniform of United Earth. She moved with the careful dignity of someone who understood that appearances mattered in this chamber. Esteemed delegates, she began, her voice steady despite the emotion Celine knew she must be suppressing. I come before you with evidence of a grave violation of galactic law and the fundamental principles upon which this council was founded. The holographic display activated, showing the attack on Typhon 4 in stark detail. Marin narrated with clinical precision, outlining treaty violations, civilian casualty numbers, and evidence linking the attack to Xenelian Central Command. This was not a misunderstanding, Marin concluded. This was a deliberate act of aggression against a peaceful colony, in violation of 7 separate treaty provisions that the Xenelian hegemony is bound by. We call upon this council to impose immediate sanctions and authorize a peacekeeping force to secure the return of abducted colonists. A murmur rippled through the chamber as the evidence faded from view. The Xenelian delegation was conspicuously absent, having declined to attend the emergency session, a telling admission of guilt in Celine's view. Lord Silas rose to speak, his movement so fluid it appeared almost liquid. The Council recognizes the concerning nature of these events, he began, his translator rendering his clicking speech into smoothly modulated standard. However, we must consider context before rushing to judgment. Celine felt her jaw tighten as Silas continued. The Typhon system has long been contested space. While current treaties recognize human mining rights, historical claims by the Xenelians cannot be dismissed. Perhaps if humans had been more willing to negotiate shared access to Typhon's resources, this unfortunate incident might have been avoided. Unfortunate incident, Celine whispered incredulously to Marine. He's calling the massacre of children an unfortunate incident? Marin gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, warning Celine to maintain protocol. Other delegates rose to speak, some expressing genuine outrage at the attack, others offering carefully worded sympathy that stopped short of supporting action. The pattern became clear. Species with economic ties to the Xenalians emphasized procedural concerns and called for further investigation, while those with human alliances demanded consequences. When the initial speeches concluded, Marin gestured for Celine to take the podium. They had agreed that the military perspective might sway fence-sitters. Distinguished delegates, Celine began, her uniform adorned with the modest insignia of her rank. I speak not only as a military commander, but as someone who has devoted her life to upholding the peace this council represents. The attack on Typhon 4 was not a tactical strike against military targets or strategic assets. The Xenalians specifically targeted civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, residential blocks. She activated her own display, showing the systematic pattern of the Xenalian attack. This was methodical extermination and enslavement, not a military objective. If such actions carry no consequences, then what meaning do our treaties have? What purpose does this council serve? Lord Silas interrupted with a dismissive gesture. Admiral Kova speaks with the naive passion typical of humans. Your species is young in galactic terms, barely 2 centuries since you achieved faster-than-light travel. Perhaps that explains your touching faith in paper promises. His scales flickered, with patterns that the translator didn't capture, but that Celine recognized as amusement. Treaties are tools of statecraft, Admiral, not moral absolutes. They exist to be renegotiated when circumstances change. The Xenalians simply chose a dramatic method of opening new negotiations. Celine felt heat rise in her face but maintained her composure. If treaties are merely suggestions to be violated at will, then this council has no purpose. Without enforceable agreements, we return to the law of the strongest, a system that benefits established powers like the Zexian Imperium, but leaves developing worlds vulnerable. The debate continued for hours, eventually moving to procedural votes on forming an investigative committee, a transparent, delaying tactic. Celine watched with growing disillusionment as erstwhile allies avoided eye contact while casting votes against immediate action. It's politics, Marin murmured as they left the chamber, defeat evident in the slump of her shoulders. The Xenalians have been cultivating leverage over key council members for decades. Trade agreements, territorial concessions, technology transfers. They've built a network of obligations that's now paying dividends. While we trusted in the system, Celine concluded bitterly. We'll keep pushing through diplomatic channels, Marin assured her. This isn't over. But as their shuttle departed, the council orbital yard, Celine gazed out at the vast structure, a monument to cooperation that had just failed her people utterly, and felt something fundamental shift within her. The faces of Typhon's dead deserved more than diplomatic maneuvering. Back aboard Aegis, Celine called her senior staff to the secure strategy room. The circular chamber was designed for open discussion, but today, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. The council has failed us, she stated plainly, once everyone was seated. They've established an investigative committee, which means months of deliberation, while the Xenalians consolidate their hold on Typhon 4 and possibly prepare strikes against other colonies. Captain Rian Voss leaned forward. With respect, Admiral, this is the outcome I've been warning about. The council species act in their own interests, not ours. The Xenalians calculated correctly that they could violate our borders with minimal consequences. What are our options? Asked Commander Takeda, the station's security chief. Celine activated the central display, showing a map of human colonies along the Xenalian border. We can redistribute our forces to strengthen defenses at key locations, but that leaves others vulnerable. Our fleet isn't large enough to protect everything simultaneously. Then we need to make them fear attacking any of our colonies, Rian said bluntly. Defensive posturing won't achieve that. We need to demonstrate that aggression against humanity carries an unacceptable cost. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. What Rian was suggesting bordered on the unthinkable, a preemptive strike against Xenalian military assets. That would violate the very treaties we're accusing them of breaking, Celine countered. It would undermine our position on the Council and potentially trigger a wider conflict. The treaties are already broken, Rian insisted. They're just pieces of paper the Xenalians used to lull us into complacency while they prepared their attack. Now thousands of our people are dead, and thousands more are being worked to death in labor camps while we debate ethical niceties. Before Celine could respond, her secure comm chimed with an incoming transmission from Earth's Defense Ministry. The face of Minister Helena Chen appeared, her expression grave. Admiral Kova, I've received your preliminary report on the Council session. The outcome is disappointing but not unexpected. The Unified Earth Government has authorized me to share classified information with you. She paused, seemingly weighing her next words carefully. Are you familiar with Project Darkstrike? Celine felt a chill run through her. I've heard rumors, Minister. A theoretical weapons platform. Not theoretical. Admiral, the prototype has been under development for 15 years. Housed in a secure facility beneath Olympus Mons on Mars. In light of recent events, the government has accelerated the final testing phase. Rian leaned forward, a gleam of interest in her eyes. What exactly is Arcstrike capable of? Minister Chen's expression remained carefully neutral. It's a focused energy projector, utilizing quantum entanglement principles to bypass conventional defenses. In simple terms, it can target and neutralize an enemy vessel or installation regardless of distance or shielding, with surgical precision or widespread effect, depending on settings. That technology violates the Weapons Limitation Treaty of 2397, Celine pointed out, though her voice lacked conviction. After Typhon, treaty violations seemed a hollow concern. Earth never formally ratified that particular provision, Chen replied smoothly. We maintained theoretical research as a contingency against exactly this scenario, a fundamental threat to human colonies that the Council proves unwilling to address. Celine understood the unspoken message. Earth's government was offering her a weapon powerful enough to change the equation with the Xenalians, a weapon that would alter humanity's place in the galactic order forever. What are my orders, Minister? She asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Prepare your forces. Admiral, the Arcstrike system will be transferred to Aegis within 48 hours. You are authorized to use it at your discretion to protect human interests. Chen's eyes held Celine's through the view screen. The government trusts your judgment on deployment. After the transmission ended, the strategy room remained silent for several long moments. This changes everything, Rian finally said, unable to completely mask her satisfaction. It changes us, Celine corrected quietly. The question is, into what? On Typhon 4, Dr. Alara Mine picked her way through the rubble of what had been the colony's main medical center. 3 days after the attack, the air still tasted of ash and the distinctive ozone tang of Xenalian energy weapons. As the colony's chief medical officer, she had survived only because she'd been in the deep mining tunnels treating a case of pressure sickness when the attack began. Now she led the survivors, just over 8,000 colonists out of the original 22,000. Many were injured, all were traumatized, and everyone had lost someone. The Xenalians had taken nearly 5,000 colonists with them, predominantly the young and able-bodied. Dr. Min, a voice called out, and she turned to see Lu Wei, one of her remaining nurses, hurrying toward her. The communication array is partially functional. We're receiving transmissions from Earth. Alara followed Lu to the makeshift command center they'd established in one of the intact storage facilities. Inside, a group of colonists huddled around a flickering holodisplay, showing a news broadcast. "Oh. Council session has concluded with no immediate action authorized," the broadcaster was saying. While Ambassador Vale expressed profound disappointment with the outcome, she emphasized that diplomatic efforts will continue. A murmur of anger rippled through the gathered survivors. Alara felt it too, a rising heat that threatened to consume the professional detachment she'd clung to since the attack. "They're abandoning us," someone said bitterly. "Just like they abandoned New Titan when the Orvani pirates raided it." "Earth won't abandon us," Alara found herself saying, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "This is different. The Xenalians violated explicit treaties. There will be consequences." "What consequences?" demanded Jorge Santos, who had lost his entire family in the attack. "More strongly worded statements? Another treaty for them to ignore? My children are either dead or enslaved, and the council is forming committees." Alara had no answer for him. The cold truth was that Typhon IV was a remote colony, valuable for its mineral resources, but not central to Earth's security. If the political cost of meaningful action was too high, history suggested they might indeed be sacrificed to expediency. "We need to make ourselves heard," she said finally. "Not just through official channels. We need to reach the public on Earth directly, show them what happened here." Liu nodded. "The Xenalians destroyed our main transmitters, but we could modify the backup array to broadcast on commercial frequencies." "Do it," Alara decided. "Record testimonies. Document the destruction and the atrocities. Make it impossible for anyone to look away." As the colonists dispersed to begin this work, Alara found herself alone with the holodisplay. It now showed footage of Admiral Selene Kova leaving the council chamber, her face set in lines of controlled fury that resonated with Alara's own feelings. "Make them pay, Admiral," she whispered to the image. "Make them remember what happens when you break faith with humanity." In the following days, footage from Typhon IV flooded Earth's media networks. Dr. Alara Mine became the face of the survivors. Her calm recounting of the atrocities combined with her unwavering gaze created a powerful narrative that resonated across human space. Public opinion shifted rapidly from shock to outrage to demands for action. Aboard Aegis, Selene watched these developments with grim satisfaction. The political pressure was building exactly as needed. Meanwhile, the Arc Strike system had arrived and been integrated into the station's command infrastructure, a sleek console of black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. System diagnostics complete," reported Lieutenant Commander Patel, the weapons specialist assigned to the project. "Targeting algorithms are online and calibrated. The system is fully operational." Selene nodded, studying the deceptively simple interface. Such tremendous power contained in such an understated package. "Have we received updated intelligence on Xenalian fleet movements?" "Yes, Admiral," Rian responded, bringing up a tactical display. "Their main battle group has withdrawn to their home system, but they've left significant forces at Typhon IV and increased patrols along our shared border. Intelligence suggests they're assessing our response before deciding their next move." "And the Council?" Ambassador Vale reports continued obstruction from the Zexian bloc. Lord Silas is now openly suggesting that human colonies in disputed regions should be placed under Council administration for their protection, essentially legitimizing the Xenalian action after the fact. Selene felt a cold clarity descend over her thoughts. The pieces were aligning exactly as she had feared. The Xenalians had calculated correctly that they could act with impunity, and now other species were moving to capitalize on perceived human weakness. Admiral, Rian said quietly. Incoming transmission from Dr. Alara Min on Typhon Fu. She's requesting to speak with you directly. Celine was surprised. She had never met the doctor personally. Put her through to my private office. Dr. Mine's face appeared on the screen moments later. A woman perhaps in her 50s, with deep lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes and mouth. Despite this, her gaze was steady and penetrating. Admiral Kova, she began without preamble. I appreciate you taking my call. I'll be direct. Rumors are circulating among the survivors that Earth possesses the capability to strike back decisively against the Xenalians, but is hesitating for political reasons. I need to know if that's true. Celine carefully maintained her neutral expression. Dr. Min, I can't comment on classified military capabilities. With respect, Admiral, I'm not asking for technical specifications. The people of Typhon 4 have lost everything. They need to know if their government has the will to protect what remains and prevent this from happening to other colonies. The diplomatic process has failed, Alara interrupted flatly. We both know that. I've treated children with burn wounds from Xenalian weapons. I've documented execution sites where they lined up our educators and community leaders. This wasn't war, Admiral. It was extermination combined with resource theft. Celine was silent for a moment, weighing her response. Finally, she said, What would you have us do, Doctor? Whatever is necessary to ensure no human colony ever experiences this again. Alara replied without hesitation. The survivors here don't want vengeance. They want justice and security. If that requires force, then so be it. After the call ended, Celine remained at her desk, turning the conversation over in her mind. Dr. Min had articulated exactly what Celine herself had been thinking, that sometimes protecting peace required the willingness to shatter it. Her comm chimed again. Admiral, Rian's voice came through, tension evident even in those two syllables. The Council has called another emergency session. The Xenalians will be attending this time. Prepare my shuttle, Celine ordered. And Captain, place the Arc Strike system on standby protocol. Authorization Kova Alpha 7. There was a brief pause before Rian responded. Arc Strike on standby, Admiral. Authorization confirmed. The council chamber seemed smaller somehow, as Celine took her place beside Ambassador Vale. Perhaps it was the addition of the Xenalian delegation, 6 tall, chitinous beings with compound eyes that reflected light in disturbing patterns. Or perhaps it was simply that Celine now saw the chamber for what it truly was, a theater where power played out behind a veneer of principle. The Xenalian ambassador, Vex Har, was surprisingly forthright in his address to the council. The hegemony acknowledges its military action at the human mining colony, he stated, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into bland standard. This action was necessitated by repeated human encroachment on historically Xenalian resource claims. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber as he continued. The humans have consistently refused equitable resource-sharing arrangements, while expanding their colonial footprint in contested regions. The incident at Typhon 4 should be viewed as a limited enforcement action to correct this imbalance. Limited enforcement? Marin Vale's voice cut through the chamber. You slaughtered thousands of civilians. Regrettable collateral effects. Vexahar responded with a dismissive gesture of his upper limbs. Had the humans evacuated promptly when our forces arrived, casualties would have been minimal. Celine felt something shift inside her, a final barrier of restraint giving way. She activated her comm unit, connecting directly to Aegis. Captain Voss, she said quietly. Confirm Arc Strike status. Arc Strike ready, Admiral, came Rian's immediate response. Awaiting target designation. Lord Silas was speaking now, his tone reasonable and measured as he proposed a balanced solution that would require human colonies to share resources with Xenalian administrators. The grotesque injustice of it, negotiating terms with mass murderers, made Celine's decision crystallize. She rose to her feet. "The Council recognizes Admiral Celine Kova," announced the chair being. "Esteemed delegates," she began, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was about to do. "For centuries, humanity has placed its faith in treaties, in negotiation, in the principle that civilized beings can resolve differences without resorting to violence. We believe the Council embodied these values." She looked directly at the Xenelian delegation. "When our colony was attacked, when our children were murdered and our people enslaved, we came to this chamber seeking justice. Instead, we found calculation, politics, expediency." Celine activated a small, holographic display on her wrist. "I address this not only to the Council, but to all species who might consider attacking human settlements in the future. Humanity's restraint has been mistaken for weakness. That misunderstanding ends today." She entered a command sequence on the display. "Captain Voss, designate target. Xenelian diplomatic vessel Vanguard. Currently docked at berth 17 of the Council orbital yard. Execute arc strike." A horrified hush fell over the chamber as delegates realized what was happening. The Xenelian ambassador's compound eyes reflected confusion, then dawning comprehension. "You cannot," he began. "It is already done," Celine replied quietly. Outside the council chamber, visible through the vast crystalline viewport, a pinpoint of impossibly bright light appeared near the docking berths. It expanded for a fraction of a second, engulfing the sleek form of the Xenelian vessel Vanguard. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light collapsed inward, leaving nothing but drifting debris where the ship had been. No explosion, no shockwave, just absolute molecular disintegration, precise and contained. The silence in the chamber was complete. Every delegate stared at the viewport, then at Celine, comprehension dawning in dozens of alien faces. Humanity had just revealed a weapon of unprecedented power, and the willingness to use it. The Vanguard was evacuated before firing, Celine stated into the silence. No lives were lost. This demonstration was a courtesy that the Xenelians did not extend to Typhon 4. She turned to face Vexhar directly. "You have 24 hours to withdraw all forces from human territory and return every abducted colonist. After that, we will target military installations within the Xenelian hegemony itself." The Xenelian ambassador's posture had changed completely. The arrogant angle of his limbs now pulled tight against his body in what Selena recognized as a gesture of submission. "This is an act of war," Lord Silas declared, his scales pulsing with patterns of alarm. "No," Celine corrected him. "This is an act of justice. Humanity remains committed to peace, but now that peace will be enforced." As pandemonium erupted in the council chamber, Celine felt strangely calm. The line had been crossed. Humanity had finally broken its self-imposed limitations, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. News of the Arc Strike demonstration spread across the galaxy at the speed of quantum communications. Reactions varied wildly by species and region. Some worlds immediately recalled their ambassadors from Earth in protest, while others hastily reaffirmed their friendship with humanity. The Xenelians, faced with irrefutable evidence of a weapon they could neither counter nor match, complied with Celine's ultimatum within 12 hours. On Typhon 4, Dr. Alara Mine stood with other colonists as transport ships began returning the abducted settlers. Many were injured. All were traumatized. But they were alive, a miracle no one had dared hope for a day earlier. "Did you know this would happen?" Lou asked her quietly, as they watched tearful reunions unfold across the landing field. Alara shook her head. "Not specifically, but I knew Admiral Kova wouldn't abandon us to political convenience. There's steel in that woman." When her comm unit chimed with a notification of an incoming transmission from Aegis, Alara wasn't entirely surprised. She stepped away from the crowd to answer. "Dr. Min," Admiral Kova greeted her, looking somehow both tired and energized. "I wanted to check on the repatriation process personally. It's proceeding well, Admiral. The Xenalians are being surprisingly cooperative." Alara studied the other woman's face. "Your demonstration has changed everything. For better or worse," Celine agreed. "I'm coming to Typhon 4 tomorrow with medical supplies and engineering teams. I'd like to meet with you and other community leaders to discuss rebuilding plans." After the call ended, Alara looked up at the sky, where the distinctive silhouettes of peacekeeper vessels now maintained a protective perimeter around the planet. The universe had shifted on its axis. Humanity had revealed itself capable of terrible power, wielded with precision. What that would mean for the future, no one could say with certainty. Celine's shuttle landed on Typhon 4 the next day, touching down on a landing pad still scarred by Xenalian weapons fire. As she stepped out into the harsh sunlight, the devastation was immediately apparent. Buildings reduced to rubble, blackened craters where homes had stood, makeshift medical facilities overflowing with the injured. Dr. Alara Mine waited at the edge of the landing zone, her tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. As Selene approached, she noticed the respect with which other colonists regarded the doctor, stepping aside, nodding deferentially. In the crucible of crisis, leadership had crystallized around this woman. "Admiral Kova," Alara greeted her, extending a hand. "Welcome to what remains of Typhon 4. Celine clasped the offered hand firmly. "Dr. Min, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "The circumstances are improving, thanks to you." Alara gestured toward the settlement. "Would you like to see what you saved?" The tour was difficult. Block after block of destruction, improvised graves, hollow-eyed survivors watching Celine with expressions ranging from gratitude to accusation. She bore their scrutiny stoically, understanding that for some, her arrival was too late. "The Xenalians were methodical," Alara explained as they walked. "They targeted communication arrays first, then defense systems, then civilian gathering places, schools, markets, medical facilities. They wanted to maximize both casualties and terror." Celine nodded grimly. "A standard subjugation protocol. We've seen it before in historical records from other conflicts." They paused at what had been the colony's central plaza. Now it was a field hospital, with medical personnel moving between rows of injured colonists. "The returning abductees bring stories," Alara continued quietly. "The Xenalians were processing them for labor camps, separating families, categorizing people by physical capabilities. They didn't see humans as people, just resources to be exploited." "That won't happen again," Celine promised. "Not here, not anywhere." Alara studied her face. "Because of Arcstrike." It wasn't a question, but Celine answered anyway. "Yes, the balance of power has shifted. The Xenalians understand now that attacking human settlements carries an unacceptable cost." "And the other species, the Council?" "They're adjusting to the new reality." Celine's mouth twisted slightly. "Some better than others. The Zexians have withdrawn their ambassador in protest. Others are suddenly eager to renegotiate trade agreements on terms more favorable to humanity." They continued walking, passing a group of engineers already at work restoring power systems. Celine noticed how the colonists straightened as she passed, some offering salutes or nods of respect. The news footage of the council demonstration had clearly reached even this remote colony. "Was it difficult?" Alara asked suddenly. "Making the decision to use it?" Celine considered the question carefully. "Yes and no. Breaking with everything I believed about how humanity should conduct itself in the galaxy. That was difficult. But the decision itself, in that moment, was crystal clear." They reached a ridge overlooking the colony, where the destruction was visible in its entirety. a scar carved into the landscape by deliberate malice. "Some of the survivors are calling you the Breaker," Alara said. "It's not meant unkindly. They see it as breaking the chains that bound humanity to ideals no other species respected." Celine felt uncomfortable with the title, but understood its origin. What happens next will determine whether that breaking was wisdom or folly. Power without restraint becomes tyranny. We've demonstrated our capability. Now, we must demonstrate our responsibility. Alara nodded thoughtfully. "That's why you're here personally, isn't it? Not just to oversee the aid mission." "Partly," Celine admitted. "I needed to see the consequences, both of the Xenalian attack and of my response, to remind myself of the weight of these decisions." As they stood in silence overlooking the devastation, Celine's comm unit chimed. It was Ambassador Vale. "Admiral!" Marin's face appeared, looking more animated than Celine had seen her since before the attack. "The Council has just approved an emergency session to discuss humanity's proposal for an enforcement mechanism for existing treaties." The Xenalians seconded the motion. "They're running scared," Celine observed. "Everyone is," Marin replied with a grim smile. "But fear can be the beginning of respect. This is the opening we needed." After the transmission ended, Celine turned back to find Alara watching her with an inscrutable expression. "You've changed us," the doctor said finally. "Not just how others see us, but how we see ourselves." "For better or worse," Celine echoed her earlier words. "Both, I think," Alara replied. "That's the nature of transformation." 3 months later, Celine stood at the viewport of her private quarters aboard Aegis, watching Earth rotate serenely below. The ship traffic around the station had increased dramatically in recent weeks. Diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy arriving for consultations. Trade delegations eager to establish new agreements. Even tourist ships filled with beings curious to see the home of the species that had so dramatically reshaped galactic politics. Her door chimed, and she called for the visitor to enter. It was Ambassador Vale, recently returned from another council session. "The treaty enforcement protocol passed its final vote," Marin announced without preamble. 17 species in favor, 4 against, 5 abstentions. "And the arc strike provision?" "Accepted as written. Humanity will maintain exclusive control of the technology, but deploy it only under the authority of the Multi-Species Oversight Committee." Celine nodded, satisfaction mingling with lingering unease. The diplomatic solution was elegant. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's enforcer, but with safeguards against unilateral action. It formalized the new power reality while preventing an arms race as other species attempted to develop their own versions of Arcstrike. "Lord Silas voted in favor," Marin added with a touch of irony. "Apparently, the Zexian Imperium has discovered a newfound respect for treaty obligations." "Amazing how that works," Celine replied dryly. Marin moved to stand beside her at the viewport. "The Defense Ministry has approved your resignation from the Peacekeeper Command. Your appointment as humanity's representative to the Enforcement Committee will be announced tomorrow." Celine had requested the change weeks ago, recognizing that her actions had transformed her into a symbol. The galaxy now associated Admiral Kova with humanity's willingness to use overwhelming force. That symbol had its uses in diplomacy. But actual military command required someone without such baggage. "Captain Voss will make an excellent admiral," she said. "She understands the new balance we're trying to maintain." "And Dr. Min has accepted the governorship of Typhon Fur," Marin added. "The reconstruction is proceeding ahead of schedule." Celine nodded, unsurprised. Alara had proven herself a natural leader during the crisis and its aftermath. The two women had maintained regular communication, finding in each other kindred spirits forged in the same fire. "It's strange," Celine mused, watching a Zexian diplomatic vessel glide past the station. For centuries, humanity defined itself by its restraint, its commitment to peace through cooperation rather than force. We prided ourselves on being different from species like the Xenilians. We still are, Marin countered. The difference is that now our principles are backed by power. We demonstrated not just the capability, but the will to enforce justice. At what cost, though? Celine turned away from the viewport. No species will ever look at humanity the same way again. We're feared now as much as respected. Perhaps that was inevitable, Marin suggested. No civilization in galactic history has maintained influence through moral authority alone. Eventually, principles must be defended with strength. Celine wasn't entirely convinced, but she recognized the practical truth in Marin's words. The galaxy was not the idealistic place humanity had wanted it to be. Adaptation was necessary for survival. The true test will come in how we use this new position, she said finally. Whether we allow power to corrupt our principles or find a way to wield it in service of the justice we've always believed in. As Marin departed, Celine returned her gaze to Earth, the blue jewel that had nurtured humanity from its earliest days to its current position at the center of galactic politics. The path forward was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But one thing was clear. No species would ever forget the day humans finally broke their self-imposed limitations and revealed their true capability. In that breaking, something new had been forged. A humanity that had lost its innocence but perhaps gained the wisdom to survive in a universe more complex and dangerous than they had wanted to believe. Whether that transformation would ultimately prove humanity's salvation or its downfall remained to be written in the stars.